Imagine a situation where you are placed in a moment of sudden responsibility, one that you never asked for, yet cannot escape. A moment where time collapses into seconds, and choice becomes unavoidable. Picture yourself operating a trolley moving at high speed along a narrow track. Ahead, you notice a group of 5 workers repairing the rails. You attempt to stop, but you quickly realize the brakes have failed. You know with certainty that if nothing changes, the trolley will strike them, and their lives will be lost. Your heart races, panic sets in, and the weight of the moment presses down on you. Then, almost unexpectedly, you notice something else. There is a secondary track branching off to the right. On that track, there is one worker, focused on his task, unaware of the danger approaching. You realize that your steering mechanism still functions. You could turn the trolley. If you do nothing, 5 will die. If you turn, 1 will die, but 5 will live. In that instant, what is the right thing to do? What would you do if you were truly there, not in theory, not in imagination, but in reality? Many people, when faced with this question, instinctively feel drawn toward turning the trolley. The reasoning often seems simple and compelling. Saving 5 lives appears better than losing 5 when only 1 must be sacrificed. It feels like a tragic decision, but also a necessary one. When people explain their reasoning, they often say something like this: allowing 5 people to die when there is a way to prevent it, even at the cost of 1 life, feels morally unacceptable. The loss of life is tragic either way, but minimizing that loss seems like the most humane option. It is not about cruelty or indifference, but about choosing the lesser harm when harm is unavoidable. Some draw parallels to real-world events, moments where individuals were forced to make impossible decisions under extreme pressure. They speak of scenarios where sacrifice was seen as heroic, not because life was taken lightly, but because the intention was to prevent a greater catastrophe. In those moments, the guiding belief is that while every life has value, outcomes still matter, especially when lives hang in the balance. Yet not everyone agrees with this conclusion. A smaller number of people resist the idea of turning the trolley. Their discomfort runs deep. They worry about the logic behind such decisions. If we justify killing 1 to save many, where does that reasoning stop? History offers painful reminders of how such thinking has been misused, twisted into justifications for oppression, violence, and even genocide. The fear is that once we accept numbers as the deciding factor, we risk losing sight of the individual human being. Those who hold this view may argue that intentionally causing the death of 1 person, even for a perceived greater good, crosses a moral line that should not be crossed. From this perspective, choosing not to act, even when the outcome is tragic, avoids assuming the role of executioner. It preserves a moral boundary that consequences alone should not erase. Now consider a different situation, similar in outcome but different in structure. This time, you are not operating the trolley. You are standing on a bridge above the track, watching as a trolley speeds toward 5 workers below. Once again, the brakes do not work. Once again, 5 lives are moments from being lost. You feel powerless, until you notice a person standing next to you, leaning over the edge of the bridge. This person is large, and you realize that if he were to fall onto the track, his body would stop the trolley. He would die, but the 5 workers would live. Unlike before, you are not redirecting a machine already in motion. You would have to physically push this person over the edge. The question returns, sharper now: would you do it? Interestingly, many people who were confident about turning the trolley hesitate here. The numbers have not changed. 1 life versus 5. Yet the emotional and moral reaction is dramatically different. Most people recoil at the idea of pushing someone to their death, even if the outcome saves others. This raises an unsettling question. If saving 5 lives justified sacrificing 1 in the first situation, why does that reasoning feel less convincing now? What changed? The outcome is the same, but the act itself feels different. Some people explain the difference by focusing on directness. In the first scenario, the death feels like a side effect of redirecting danger. In the second, the death feels intentional, personal, and violent. The individual on the bridge was not part of the original danger. He would have walked away unharmed if not for your intervention. Involving him feels like crossing an additional moral boundary. Others point out that in the first case, you are already part of the situation. You are the driver. The danger exists because of the trolley under your control. In the second case, you are merely an observer, and choosing to intervene means inserting yourself into a tragedy that was not caused by you. The moral weight of becoming actively responsible feels heavier than allowing events to unfold. Yet critics of this distinction push back. They argue that choosing to turn the trolley is still a conscious decision to cause someone's death. Whether by pushing or by steering, the choice is deliberate. The difference, they say, may be psychological rather than moral. Our instincts recoil more strongly from physical violence, but that does not necessarily mean the underlying moral logic is different. Imagine altering the bridge scenario slightly. Instead of pushing the person, suppose there is a lever that opens a trapdoor beneath him, dropping him onto the track. Would that make the action more acceptable? For many, the answer is still no. Even when physical contact is removed, the sense of wrongdoing remains. Now shift to another setting entirely. Imagine you are a doctor in an emergency room. 6 patients arrive after a terrible accident. 5 have injuries that are serious but treatable. 1 is critically injured and will require your full attention for hours. If you focus on saving the 1, the 5 will die. If you focus on the 5, the 1 will die. Once again, the numbers present the same dilemma. In this case, most people feel comfortable prioritizing the 5. The doctor's role, they argue, is to save as many lives as possible when resources are limited. The decision feels tragic but appropriate, even expected. The moral discomfort that appeared in the bridge scenario seems largely absent here. Now consider one final variation. You are still a doctor, but now you are a transplant surgeon. 5 patients will die without immediate organ transplants. Each needs a different organ. There are no donors available. In the next room is a healthy individual who came in for a routine checkup. He trusts you. He is vulnerable. If you were to take his organs, he would die, but the 5 would live. Almost no one supports this action. The idea feels horrifying. The same calculation that seemed reasonable moments ago now feels like a profound violation. Once again, the outcome is identical, 1 life traded for 5. Yet our moral intuition rejects it strongly. These scenarios reveal something important about how we reason morally. We often begin with our gut reactions to specific cases. Then we try to articulate principles that explain those reactions. When new cases challenge those principles, we revise them. There is a constant back and forth between judgment and principle, each shaping the other. 2 broad ways of thinking emerge from this process. One approach focuses on outcomes. It judges actions by the results they produce. If an action leads to more overall well-being, less suffering, or more lives saved, it is considered morally right. This way of thinking emphasizes consequences above all else. Another approach focuses on the nature of the action itself. It asks whether certain acts are inherently wrong, regardless of the outcomes. From this perspective, intentionally killing an innocent person may be wrong even if it saves many others. Moral limits exist that consequences alone cannot override. These 2 ways of thinking have shaped centuries of moral and political philosophy. One emphasizes calculation, balance, and aggregate happiness. The other emphasizes duties, rights, and moral boundaries. Throughout history, philosophers have debated which approach better captures our deepest moral commitments. As this exploration continues, these questions will extend beyond thought experiments. They will touch real-world issues that shape laws, policies, and everyday decisions. Questions about fairness, freedom, equality, responsibility, and justice all trace back to these fundamental ways of thinking about right and wrong. But there is a warning that comes with this journey. Examining moral questions deeply can be unsettling. Philosophy has a way of taking familiar beliefs and making them feel strange. It does not always provide comfort or certainty. Instead, it challenges assumptions and exposes tensions we may prefer to ignore. Once a belief is questioned, it rarely returns unchanged. Moral reflection can feel like losing innocence. It forces us to confront the reasons behind our convictions and the limits of our certainty. This can be uncomfortable, even destabilizing, both personally and socially. There is a temptation, when faced with such complexity, to retreat into skepticism. To say that everyone has their own moral truth, and there is no point in reasoning further. But this retreat offers no real refuge. Whether we acknowledge it or not, we live out answers to these questions every day through our choices, our policies, and our actions. Avoiding reflection does not free us from moral responsibility. It simply leaves our decisions unexamined. The challenge, then, is not to escape moral reasoning, but to engage with it honestly, even when it is difficult. The purpose of this journey is not to hand you final answers, but to awaken careful thought. To encourage a restlessness that refuses easy conclusions. To invite you to think deeply about justice, responsibility, and what it means to act rightly in a complex world that we now turn from imagined dilemmas to a real historical case, one that forced judges, jurors, and citizens to confront these moral tensions not in theory, but in life and death. It is a story that took place far from lecture halls, far from comfortable discussion rooms, and deep within the unforgiving vastness of the open sea. In the late 19th century, a small yacht set sail on a journey that would never reach its destination. The vessel encountered violent storms, was badly damaged, and eventually sank in the South Atlantic Ocean. 4 men escaped the wreck in a small lifeboat. They had no engine, no navigation equipment, and almost no supplies. They drifted for days under the relentless sun, surrounded by water they could not drink and silence that offered no rescue. As the days passed, hunger grew unbearable. Thirst weakened their bodies. Hope slowly began to fade. One of the 4 men, a young cabin boy, fell gravely ill. He drank seawater in desperation and became delirious. His condition worsened until it was clear to the others that he would not survive much longer. The remaining men faced a choice that few of us can imagine confronting. If nothing was done, all of them would likely die. If one person died sooner, the others might survive by consuming his body. After days of anguish, the decision was made. The cabin boy was killed, and the others fed on his remains. Days later, they were rescued. When they returned to England, they were arrested and charged with murder. The case went to trial, and the nation was forced to confront a haunting question: was their action morally and legally justified? Should the law excuse killing when it is done for survival? Does necessity make an otherwise wrongful act acceptable? As jurors, imagine the weight of that decision. On one hand, the act itself was undeniably intentional killing. On the other hand, the circumstances were extreme, desperate, and tragic beyond measure. If they had not acted, all would have died. By acting, some lived. Those who defended the men argued from a consequentialist perspective. The outcome mattered most. The loss of one life saved several others. In conditions of total desperation, moral rules must bend to survival. To condemn the survivors, they argued, would be to ignore the realities of human nature and the instinct to live. Those who opposed this reasoning argued that allowing necessity as a defense would erode the foundation of moral and legal order. If killing is justified whenever survival is at stake, then no innocent life is truly protected. Law, they argued, must stand firm even in the most tragic circumstances, or else it loses its moral authority. The court ultimately ruled against the survivors. It declared that necessity is not a justification for murder. The judgment affirmed a categorical moral boundary: intentional killing of an innocent person is wrong, regardless of the consequences. This ruling echoed a deeper philosophical stance. It aligned with the idea that morality is not only about outcomes, but about principles that must hold even when they demand great sacrifice. It reinforced the belief that some actions are forbidden, no matter how beneficial their results might appear, and yet, the discomfort remains. Many people, even while agreeing with the ruling, feel an unease. They imagine themselves adrift at sea, weakened by hunger, watching death approach. They wonder whether they would have the strength to uphold moral absolutes in such conditions. This tension between principle and compassion does not disappear simply because a verdict is rendered. This is precisely why moral philosophy refuses to stay silent. It presses on these uncomfortable edges. It asks not only what the law should say, but what justice truly requires. It invites us to examine whether our moral instincts are consistent, and if not, what that inconsistency reveals about us. One influential way of approaching these questions is the theory of maximizing overall well-being. According to this view, the right action is the one that produces the greatest balance of happiness over suffering. Pleasure and pain become the measuring tools of morality. Decisions are evaluated by their impact on the collective good. This way of thinking has intuitive appeal. It reflects how we often reason in everyday life. We weigh costs and benefits. We ask which choice will help the most people. We try to reduce harm where we can. In public policy, this approach seems practical, even necessary. Yet when pushed to its limits, it leads to troubling implications. If happiness is all that matters, then individual rights may be overridden whenever doing so benefits the majority. Innocent people may become instruments for the greater good. The discomfort we felt in the transplant case and the bridge scenario resurfaces here with full force. An alternative moral vision insists that individuals are not merely vessels of pleasure or pain. They are persons with dignity, autonomy, and rights that must be respected. From this perspective, using a person solely as a means to an end is morally unacceptable, no matter how noble the goal. This view emphasizes duties rather than calculations. It insists that certain actions violate moral law by their very nature. Killing an innocent person, deceiving for personal gain, or exploiting the vulnerable are wrong not because of what they lead to, but because of what they are. As these ideas unfold, they shape how we think about justice in society. They influence debates about punishment, equality, freedom, and responsibility. They affect how we think about war and peace, healthcare and education, speech and silence. But engaging with these questions comes at a cost. Moral reflection unsettles comfort. It destabilizes certainty. It demands that we examine beliefs we may have inherited without question. It can make us feel less confident, less sure of ourselves, at least for a time. There is a temptation to retreat, to say that these questions are too complex, that everyone should simply follow their own moral compass. But this retreat does not resolve the tension. It only hides it. We still act. We still choose. And those choices still carry moral weight. Even skepticism itself becomes a position, one that quietly endorses the status quo. Refusing to question moral assumptions does not free us from them. It simply leaves them unexamined and unchallenged. Philosophy insists that we do better. Not by promising certainty, but by demanding honesty. It asks us to confront the reasons behind our judgments, to test them against new cases, and to revise them when they fail. This process is demanding. It requires humility and courage. It asks us to accept that we may be wrong, and that learning may require discomfort. But it also offers something profound, a deeper understanding of ourselves and the values that shape our lives. In the end, moral philosophy does not tell us exactly what to think. It teaches us how to think. It awakens a restlessness that refuses easy answers. It reminds us that justice is not a settled destination, but an ongoing pursuit, and as we reflect on these stories, these arguments, and these principles, we are invited into that pursuit. Not as spectators, but as participants. Because whether we realize it or not, the story being examined is not only about trolley cars, doctors, or shipwrecks. As these ideas unfold, they shape how we think about justice in society. They influence debates about punishment, equality, freedom, and responsibility. They affect how we think about war and peace, healthcare and education, speech and silence. But engaging with these questions comes at a cost. Moral reflection unsettles comfort. It destabilizes certainty. It demands that we examine beliefs we may have inherited without question. It can make us feel less confident, less sure of ourselves, at least for a time. There is a temptation to retreat, to say that these questions are too complex, that everyone should simply follow their own moral compass. But this retreat does not resolve the tension. It only hides it. We still act. We still choose. And those choices still carry moral weight. Even skepticism itself becomes a position, one that quietly endorses the status quo. Refusing to question moral assumptions does not free us from them. It simply leaves them unexamined and unchallenged. Philosophy insists that we do better. Not by promising certainty, but by demanding honesty. It asks us to confront the reasons behind our judgments, to test them against new cases, and to revise them when they fail. This process is demanding. It requires humility and courage. It asks us to accept that we may be wrong, and that learning may require discomfort. But it also offers something profound, a deeper understanding of ourselves and the values that shape our lives. In the end, moral philosophy does not tell us exactly what to think. It teaches us how to think. It awakens a restlessness that refuses easy answers. It reminds us that justice is not a settled destination, but an ongoing pursuit. And as we reflect on these stories, these arguments, and these principles, we are invited into that pursuit. Not as spectators, but as participants. Because whether we realize it or not, the story being examined is not only about trolley cars, doctors, or shipwrecks. May our reasoning be guided not by fear or impulse, but by compassion, integrity, and a sincere desire to do what is right, even when the path is unclear. Amen.